Did Joe Rogan just tell us what he truly thinks about Jesus
He could have been an alien.
while criticizing atheism?
Question, is it better to be an atheist? There's no way there could be a God. I think when you die, you die. And that guy's fucking miserable.
And advocating for religious belief?
If you really believe it, it benefits your life.
Let's find out.
This is what's weird about religions. This is my, I'm a moron, but I occasionally have these moments where I'm like, I think I know what the fuck is going on. If you really believe it, it benefits your life. Even if it's hot nonsense. Even if it's a 14-year-old kid who finds golden tablets that contain the lost work of Jesus and only he can read it because he has a magic rock. Yeah. But if you get enough of those people, they make great neighbors. Like it fucking works, man.
They just
like,
want their kids
is
to go
it
to
better?
school?
But here's my question. Is it better to be an atheist and to be this person who just like objectively looks at the world and like none of this makes sense? There's no way there could be a God. I think when you die, you die. And that guy's fucking miserable. That guy's taking medication and all of his friends think he's annoying.
I mean, I'm a devout atheist, and you're right about all that. You believe like in a higher power?
Okay, so we'll get to Joe's response to the question of belief in a higher power here in a second, but I wanted to just make sure we noticed where this conversation starts, and they sort of slip into this conversation organically, and I think it's a fascinating part of a much bigger conversation, but it's sort of the classic religion versus atheism, or even religion versus science, which I think is a false dichotomy. Somehow atheism gets put on the side of science, and I think that we, in our modern world, we kind of just are not framing things very well. But to Joe's point, even if you kind of have this hokey religion, and I am not a member of the religion that they are talking about, isn't that better? Even a hokey religion might be better than atheism because our beliefs influence our behavior. What we think in our mind works out in our life. And if my starting point is atheism, that there's no God out there and therefore I'm just here by random happenstance, then my life is kind of going to suck. Like the logical conclusion of that starting point is nihilism. There is no point. There's no ultimate purpose or meaning. And if you begin in a place of even a religious belief that tells you to kind of like live a moral and upstanding life, love your neighbors, you're in a better place even if you're wrong. So that's kind of Pascal's wager, right? Even if the religious person or the Christian, which I happen to be a Christian, believes in God in a world where there is no God, then actually that Christian belief helps that person live through what is otherwise a meaningless world. And there's no drawbacks to it. When you die, you just unexist, right? There's no end, there's no eternity out there. But if there is eternity out there, and if there is a God behind creation, and if there is a point and a purpose to your life, and you reject that as like sort of an atheistic response, then the consequences are pretty severe, not just in eternity, but even in this life. You live a life where you could have access to just divinely inspired meaning and purpose and love, and you reject it for a life of random happenstance. And that is an unfortunate world to live in. And so kind of the Pascal's wager thing, I think comes in, and actually Anselm's epistemology would be another one to even look into, the idea of faith seeking understanding. I have to believe something. Everybody starts from some starting point, and that belief is going to kind of lead me on a path. Now, I think the more true your belief is, the more freedom, the more love, the more enjoyment, the more you can endure hardship. And of course, false beliefs can blind you and be destructive. And so it's really important that we sort of begin by even acknowledging that, man, I'm here, I believe certain things, but I'm seeking understanding. I'm seeking a better understanding. Even if I think I'm right, I know that there's more I can learn. So faith actually comes in to help us find truth and find understanding. It's not a placeholder for ignorance. It's not somebody who wants to abandon truth and reason so they find some sort of faith. That's not actually the way it is. Faith actually helps us and moves us forward on a quest for truth through sort of rational, we don't deny rationality. So kind of an interesting thing. And then Joe's response to this question about believing in a higher power is kind of a squirrely one, but let's check it out.
You believe like in a higher power?
No, I don't not believe. I believe
that's what my girlfriend says when I ask her.
believe there's more to the universe and more to life than we can think of through our narrow field of perception. I think there's more to human contact and interaction than just people talking to each other. I think there's a thinly veiled reality that we live in where we express our souls to each other. That's what I think. And I think it's a very complicated and confusing thing that's up by lies and deception and violence and war.
Well, so many
and
of them,
it's enhanced by friendship and love and communication. And it's this weird, there's a thing going on that's beyond just like you're born and you die. And if that thing keeps going when the physical body stops existing, I wouldn't be surprised.
Now, I wonder if a lot of people are not in the same position as Joe Rogan or similar. It's like, I don't really know what I believe. And I feel a little uncomfortable saying that I don't know what I believe. But again, there's that faith-seeking understanding that we don't have to have it all figured out, And to Joe's point about the just kind of talking with each other and having friends, I mean, that is also something that I think we have lost. We have been sort of divided into different camps. And again, that's where the belief can kind of become a blinder. It's like an ideological commitment that you're not willing to really move on, prevents you from engaging in friendly dialogue or meaningful dialogue. And we need to sort of break that down. And so I'm glad you're here, because that's part of my quest here sort of with this podcast is to realize that there's something that we gain by simply engaging in dialogue with one another in good faith, knowing that we are seeking understanding, knowing that we all start from a different starting point. And so that building those communities, I think ultimately is the way forward. That's one of the reasons why I appreciate Joe Rogan's podcast. I just did an episode on sort of the Russel Brand awakening thing, and is there an awakening going on? I tend to think that there is one. And so I think Joe is sort of rightly pointing out that there's just more going on. There's more to this life than just the material. The material is important, and it's important for us to observe that and sort of see what the Creator has communicated to us. Now they're going to go into kind of the idea of the documents and different religious texts and things like that. And I think that that's also an important part of this conversation. What evidence do we have out there that helps us sort of on this quest? And then again, sharing that with one another and having open dialogue about it, I think it's key. Also, Joe's going to throw out the idea of Jesus being an alien, so we can't overlook that part.
He's an 8.
Well,
so.
you know the guy who wrote it. That's when shit gets sketchy.
Yeah, there is something about like when it's from thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
It's easy to go like, look, there was a burning bush and God spoke to this guy, and you're like, when? Like 5,000 years ago. You're like, all right, fine. But when you're just like 3 Wednesdays ago, it happened. You're like, I'm not buying that.
There's enough stories that are similar about the ancient stories of like apocalypses, like the stuff about like the Epic of Gilgamesh is real similar to Noah and the Ark.
Jesus, a black woman.
He could have been an alien.
Jesus?
Yeah.
Sure.
That's the most Joe Rogan sentence I've ever heard.
Jesus could have been an alien.
If there was like
Get that merch
someone who came here and didn't make any sense that he was born and he just existed but knew everything and was the son of God and was trying to straighten everybody out, and then they kill him. And he's like, all right, we tried. It literally could be an alien. I mean, if you're thinking about how long ago this is thousands of years of people telling a story, right? I mean, how long after Jesus is dead before they even write the new stuff?
Well, why does no one consider
that
like that long ago?
Hundreds of years
were
after
fiction.
his death, right? Or at least 100 years after his death?
Well,
But you know what I'm saying? Like also years ago, like no one considers the idea of works of fiction.
Right.
Like everything then was just written from the thing versus
But it's
someone
also,
making entertainment.
There's a combination of that and then real events they're trying to document. So both things are true because they had a lot of shit going on back then. Like they didn't have to write fiction. They were getting killed by swords. People getting lit on fire and shot with arrows. Like there's not a time to be making shit up.
yeah, it's like what happened to your brother, and it's like, I don't know, a beast got a hold of him.
But
and
it can't
you
be
don't
all.
wanna have-
It can't be all Coliseuming. Once
Yeah,
in a
but
while, you got wind back. And there's
You're
no
not
video
gonna
games.
listen. That's life then, though. You're not gonna write Harry Potter when you're getting slayed by the Romans.
That's why you're fighting a line and goes, I got the good idea.
You're
of something with like, I don't know, a magical school.
The dude can walk on water. He walked on fucking water.
And then he put a guy's ear back on.
Water into wine. Come on, who's not happy with that idea?
So a lot of things going on there in that last clip, and essentially the writings are a narrative. There's a long history of sort of the great conversation in classical literature and stuff like that. And I actually had the privilege of having Louis Markos on the podcast, and we talked about this. We talked about the fact that some of these ancient stories, either the Bible is conversant with something like the Epic of Gilgamesh, or even ancient writers were picking up on the fact that God was doing something. And so you catch glimpses of almost like a Jesus-like character in ancient poetry and ancient literature. Now, they were, I mean, you can think of like the Iliad and the Odyssey. They were writing stories, and they were mythological, and they were instructive. And even the Bible does this. It writes history, but it doesn't write history for the purpose of history the way we think of it. It's not just giving you a sort of report of what happened. The Bible is crafted in a narrative. It's crafted in a story, because when you craft the narrative the way the Bible has, we actually get a glimpse of more truth that's going on. You can think of Jesus's parables and some of this stuff. Now, is it true? Yeah. I mean, as a Christian, I believe the Bible is true. I believe that some of these other narratives even touch on that truth, which is why I had Louis Markos on. And you know, to their point, it's like, yeah, they're not really writing the histories the way we would expect today. And I think it's, again, part of this problem becomes a framing problem. We look back into ancient history and expect ancient people to be engaged in the same type of endeavor that we are. You know, we want sort of black and white truth. We want to pin things down. You know, Ian McGilchrist's book has been really informative for me. It's like we're a little too sort of left-brained and mechanical when it comes to this stuff, and we're less poetical. You know, we're less engaged in the poetry of the thing, and I think the poetry could actually help us, or the narrative, or what have you. And so they kind of, you know, missed a few things there as far as like ancient literature and stuff, but that's okay. And even the dates and the times of Jesus's narratives, I mean, that's okay. Again, Joe has had like Stephen C. Meyer on, and he's had these conversations. In fact, I covered the Stephen C. Meyer podcast a long time ago, and so you can tell that Joe is curious about finding those types of answers, and I think that they are out there. But I think also the next step is to understand the nature of narrative and the nature of history. In a sense, like if you think of Jordan Peterson, it's like we are kind of living in a story, like God's the author. And so what is human history if not one grand narrative of all the things that God is doing in and through humanity? So there's that. To the Jesus is an alien point, of course, we can't let it go. Is this something that Joe really believes? It's a curiosity. You can tell that he's sort of curious about this idea. How do we explain the person of Jesus, the presence of the person of Jesus? Now, of course, in a modern sort of framing, we're really struggling to grasp the idea of God in human flesh. And I think that that's one of the reasons why the Bible, as a historical document and a theological document, has some credibility to it. It does not seem like it was written by just the pen of a human with the human mind. It seems divinely inspired because it's touching on something that would otherwise be impossible to conceive of. God coming into human flesh, not just a God like Zeus or something like that, but just like the infinite creator of all things, putting on human flesh. I mean, that's a really crazy idea, and yet there we find it in Scripture. Where did it come from if it wasn't divinely inspired? And so we're trying to, again, pin this idea down, maybe more from that left brain kind of mechanical modern approach, and not realize it's like, man, this is a mystery, and it's okay. And I'm going to continue to faith-seeking understanding. I'm going to continue to find understanding here. If we reduce Jesus to a alien, you know, like Billy Carson wants to do, we did. So this was the Billy Carson episode that we did, and I'll leave links to these other podcasts that I'm talking about. If we want to reduce Jesus down to the point of an alien, then we're just kicking the can down the road. Then where did the alien come from? Where did he come from? Well, we don't really know. And so ultimately, I don't find that explanation satisfactory, particularly when there's a whole lot of evidence that there's a creator out there who not only created this world that we live in and sort of left it alone, but created and then came into this world. Like the author wrote himself into the story. And then again, like the explanatory power of Jesus being an alien, it just, to me, it rings like a modern explanation of a mysterious thing. We want some sort of scientific fact to pin down when we're dealing with the realm of theology. And so we have to sort of see things almost by not looking at them. If you think of C.S. Lewis, it's like, I believe in the sun, not because I'm staring at it, but because if it wasn't for the sun, I couldn't stare at anything else. I couldn't see anything else. And so we sort of, in a way, we are in the realm of theology there. So actually, Michael Heiser, I think I shared a clip of Michael Heiser dealing with this idea of Jesus as an alien in the Billy Carson episode. And so I really appreciate Heiser and the work that he had done on this. And ultimately, again, is Joe just kind of curious about this idea? Is that a little bit easier to understand than trying to go full on and say, okay, it looks like there is a creator. It looks like that creator has left at least clues to who that creator is, but maybe also that creator left the biggest clue ever by coming into our world in the form of the person Jesus. And again, once that belief, once you apprehend that belief, it does change everything for you in a good way, and gives you that great hope of eternity. I think ultimately Joe was kind of touching on in this podcast. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you for being here and checking out this episode. There's a lot in this conversation. And to Joe's point about gathering your friends and having these conversations together, I hope that you would participate in that and share your thoughts and your ideas with me and the other people that will find this video. And I'll catch you in the next one.